Meet Reid Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reid is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reid.
Howdy, folks. This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio, broadcasting to you out of KGAB AM 650 on your dial, Cheyenne, and the Town Square Network serving the Intermountain West. Hello, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, Utah, and northern Colorado. And KFEZ, Easy, in Colorado Springs, serving southern Colorado and northern New Mexico, and of course, Monster 780 AM serving Denver. Folks, this is a big show. I've been researching this for 4 months. The interviews I've had leading up to this have been kind of the foundation of this show. You've listened to people who have had concern about national defense, people who have told you about Mr. Obama's background, Pulitzer Prize winning journalists who have done the research. You have listened to a host of economists, stalwarts in their field, both domestic and international, and hopefully I have set up a foundation for you. I'm going to be referring to some of the shows in the archives during this, but they're all going to be posted. Not all, but those that pertain to this show will be posted with this show on the website, on therightsideradio.com. If any one of these topics catch your interest, and I think all of them will catch your interest if you listen carefully, feel free to see those shows, listen to those shows at your leisure to fill in, shall we say, the details. Because if I tried to fit all that information into one show, we'd be on here 24 hours, and that's no kidding. Many of these shows go back a year and a half, 2 years. I was warning you about Europe. I was warning you about people, shall we say, desperate people in the government, a desperate government taking your 401ks and your retirement accounts. You've now seen what's happened in Cyprus. Don't think it can't happen here. I warned you about the printing of money and inflation. I warned you that the statistics you're hearing from the government are nonsense. I've warned you that the Federal Reserve and their printing press is the only thing propping up this economy. And I have warned you that Mr. Obama, behind the scenes, has established a shadow government via his czars and others. I've given you background on those czars. They were not picked by accident, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. And why don't we just say, and I've also told you, by the way, municipal bankruptcies, state bankruptcies, all of which you're seeing happen all around the country right now, 4 in California just in the last 6 months, including Stockton's $780 billion bankruptcy. This is the beginning. This is the tip of the municipal, state, county bankruptcy kind of conundrum that we're stuck in. Now, one of the things that I'm going to try and do with this show is, and I'm really going to try, I'm going to give you facts. At the end of each set of facts, I'm going to ask you to ask yourself a question. The answer is your answer. I'm just giving you the dots. I'm going to let you connect the lines. I'm going to really try and keep my opinion out of this. Once again, I've researched this. I'm going to give you the sites. You can go to Google. You can look up any one of these things. I hope you do. Please do it. Check what I'm telling you. Listen to these other shows that have additional facts, detailed facts about many of these items we're going to be brushing on in a general sense today. And then, folks, engage your brain cells. Particularly you people in Colorado. This is the last piece of opinion I'll try and have in this show, but you're being played, Colorado. If you think Mr. Obama gives a damn about you, your safety, your welfare, or your economy, other than your 5 electoral votes, you're flat wrong. Your state legislatures are breaching their oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of your state, the Colorado Constitution, by running amok down there in the State House. They should be ashamed of themselves. And listen, you may not like this. You should be ashamed of yourselves for electing them. All you people who didn't get out to the polls last time because you were too busy, it wasn't important, you didn't like anybody, blah, 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 you know. So you sow, so shall you reap. You need to get involved, folks. I think after this show, if you listen carefully, you might agree with me. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start this show right now. And this is going to be a barrage of facts. I have the show divided into background, which will give you kind of the big picture. I think you need that foundationally. Then we're going to go to international highlights, shall we say. Then we're going to go to monetary and economy highlights. Then we're going to come to some domestic highlights, and I hope I have time. We're going to come to where all this leads. Executive orders, DHS purchases of 2 billion rounds of ammunition and 2,700 light tanks and armored vehicles. And I'm going to let you connect those dots too. Because, you know, there are no coincidences, folks. Everything happens for a reason. Particularly when you have progressives who have written books, such as Mr. Obama's czars, Cass Sunstein, just to name one, that talk about the concept of nudge. Increment by increment, they move you to where you want to be. Until you're so far into the pot, you can't climb out. Think about this as we go through this, litany of facts and dots. Let's start with background. My belief is there are no coincidences. There's been research done by a lot of people. One gentleman in particular, Don Fredericks, wrote a book, The Obama Timeline, from his birth in 1961 through his first 100 days in office. I used that book, and I checked out at random various facts in various time periods of Mr. Fredericks. Every single one of them bore out. Every single one. So let's get started, shall we? We have a lot to cover together today, and it's important. So, you know that Mr. Obama just happened to know the 60s far-left radical revolutionary William Ayers, whose father was Thomas Ayers. He happened to be a close friend of Obama's mentor, communist mentor, if you listen to the Kenger interview on the right side, it's in the archives, Frank Marshall Davis. Davis worked at the communist sympathizing Chicago Defender with Vernon Jarrett. Just happened later to become the father-in-law of the Iranian-born Valerie Jarrett, who Obama just happened to choose as his closest White House advisor, and who just happened to have been CEO of Habitat Company, which just happens to manage public housing in Chicago, which just happened to get millions of dollars from the Illinois state legislature when Obama was a state senator, and which just happened to not properly maintain the housing. It eventually required demolition. Valerie Jarrett also just happened to work for the city of Chicago, and just happened to hire Michelle LaVaughn Robinson, later Michelle Obama, who just happened to work at the Sidley Austin law firm, where former fugitive from the FBI, Bernardine Dorn, also just happened to work, and where Barack Obama just happened to get a summer job. Bernardine Dorn, who just happened to be married to William Ayers, with whom she just happened to have hidden from the FBI at a San Francisco marina along with Donald Warden, who later changed his name to Khalid al-Mansour, just happened to be a mentor of the Black Panther Party founders Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who just happened to be a close associate of Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan. Farrakhan and al-Mansour were also financial advisors to a Saudi prince, who just happened to donate cash to Harvard, for which Obama just happened to get a critical letter of recommendation from Percy Sutton, who just happened to be the attorney for Malcolm X, who just happened to know Kenyan politician Tom Mboya, who just happened to be a close friend of Barack Hussein Obama Sr., who just happened to meet Malcolm X when he traveled to Kenya. Obama Sr. just happened to have his education at the University of Hawaii paid for by the Laubach Literary Institute, which just happened to have been supported by Elizabeth Mooney Kirk, who just happened to also be a friend of Malcolm X, who was associated with the Nation of Islam, which later was headed by Louis Farrakhan, who, by the way, happens to live very close to Obama's Chicago mansion, which is also located very close to the residence of Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn, who, by the way, just happened to have been occasional babysitters for Malia and Natasha Obama. After attending Occidental College and Columbia University, where he just happened to have foreign Muslim roommates, Obama moved to Chicago, and, I'm reading this, it's unbelievable. It took me a while to put this together, let me tell you. Obama moved to Chicago to work for the Industrial Area Foundation, an organization that was founded by Marxist and radical agitator Saul the Red Alinsky, the author of Rules for Radicals. Folks, on the website you can do a search, and we have a link to where you can buy that book. You should buy it. Mr. Obama, by the way, this is another fact, quoted Saul Alinsky, Handbook for Radicals, to Israeli students just 2 weeks ago when he was visiting Israel. To continue, there was a grant from the Woods Fund, and Alinsky's Rules for Radicals just happened to be the topic of Hillary Rodham Clinton's thesis at Wellesley College. And to keep going, Obama's salary at that law firm was funded by a grant from the Woods Fund, which was founded by the Woods family, whose Sahara Coal Company just happened to provide coal to Commonwealth Edison, whose CEO just happened to be Thomas Ayers, the father of William Ayers. By the way, William Ayers and Obama served together as directors on the board of the Woods Fund. Obama worked on registration drives in Chicago in the 1980s. He worked with such political groups as the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, and Socialist International, SI, through which Obama met Carl Davidson, who happened to travel to Cuba during the Vietnam War to work against the U.S. war effort, and was a former member of SDS, along with Ayers and Dorn, and was a member of the committees which were organized by a gal by the name of Marilyn Katz, another former SDS activist, and later a public relations consultant who just happened to be a longtime friend of Obama's political hatchet man, a man that you know as David Axelrod. Obama joined the Trinity United Church of Christ, whose pastor was Reverend Jeremiah Wright. Although no one had ever heard of him at the time, he got an almost impossible to believe $125,000 advance to write a book about race relations. He didn't get the book written. He went instead on vacation to Hawaii. Obama was then hired by the law firm of Minor, Banhill, and Galland. Their specialty was negotiating state government contracts to develop low-income housing. Minor just happened to have been a classmate of Bernardine Dorn, the wife of William Ayers. In 1994, Obama represented Acorn and another plaintiff against Citibank for denying mortgages to blacks. The case, if anybody wants to look it up, please do, is Bucks Robertson versus Citibank Federal Savings Bank. That's BUYCKS Robertson, ROBERSON versus Citibank Federal Savings Bank. Look it up, folks. And the lawsuit just happened to result in banks, Citibank included, being blackmailed into approving subprime loans for poor credit risks. That trend happened to spread nationwide. It just happened to lead, as we all know, to the collapse of the housing bubble. And that helped Obama defeat John McCain in 2008. In 1996, as an aside, let me get off this for just a moment. You might have heard news reports just in the last few days that the administration is now telling banks that they want them to do more subprime loans. In other words, they're going back to this theory of redistribution of wealth through mortgages. Because all these mortgages, folks, are taxpayer backed. I mean, I assume you know that. Let's continue back here. In 1966, Obama ran for the Illinois State Senate. He joined the New Party. The New Party, their basic edict was to promote Marxism. Obama was supported by Dr. Quentin Young, that's Y-O-N-G, a admitted socialist, who just happened to support a government takeover of the healthcare system. In 2003, Obama and his wife attended a dinner in honor of Rashid Khalidi, who just happened to be the former PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization operative. He's a very harsh critic of Israel. He's an advocate of Palestinian rights. Obama claims he doesn't know them, even though they have dined with him more than once, including at his home. To make a long story short, in 2004, the Illinois Democrat primary race for the U.S. Senate, frontrunner Blair Hull just happened to be forced out of the race after David Axelrod managed Hull's sealed divorce records unsealed. That allowed Obama to win the primary. He then faced popular Republican Jack Ryan, whose sealed child custody records from his divorce happened to also become unsealed. That forced Ryan to withdraw from the race. That enabled Obama to waltz into the U.S. Senate, where, after a mere 143 days, that's right, folks, 143 days in the United States Senate, he just happened to decide he was qualified to run for the President of the United States. In the meantime, Obama happened to receive $300,000 for the purchase of a $1.65 million Chicago mansion, for which he deposited only $1,000 in earnest money. Now, you folks who've bought houses out there, think about that. The seller's adjacent empty lot was appraised at no more than $500,000, and it just happened to be sold at the inflated price of $625,000. She made $37,000 a year. The assets kind of disproportionate to the income. Working for the Cook County, that's Chicago, folks, government. She also happened to be married to Tony Resco, who just happened to be Obama's main money man for his political campaigns. And only days before the Obama mansion purchase, happened to obtain a $3.5 million loan from a wealthy Iraqi by the name of Nadmi Auchi, that's A-U-C-H-I, who had been kicked out of Iraq, and just happened to have been convicted of corruption charges in France, and who just happened to ask Resco to ask then U.S. Senator Obama to help him obtain a visa to travel to the United States. So Rita Resco, who makes $37,000 a year, borrows the money for the $625,000 empty lot from the Mutual Bank of Harvey, which happened to be run by Tony Resco's pal, Amish Marahan, whose wife Anita had been charged with fraudulently receiving $2 million in Illinois taxpayer money and then not performing services for which she was paid. Obama, at the same time, happened to obtain a $1.32 million mortgage for the mansion, even though the payments of $8,000 per month, plus about $1,500 a month in property taxes, insurance, etc., exceeded more than 50% of his $162,100 United States Senate salary income. And even though Michelle Obama was claiming that She and her husband were still paying off substantial student loans and were struggling to pay for piano lessons for their daughters, one of whom just happens to look remarkably like one of the daughters of Malcolm X. Anyway, Obama obtained his mansion mortgage from the Northern Trust Bank. The board of directors of the Northern Trust Bank included Susan Crown. She's a member of the wealthy Crown family. I'm sure you guys have heard of them. They just happened to donate to Obama's campaign, and they just happened to have an ownership in defense contractor General Dynamics Corporation. And the Crown family, believe it or not, sat on the board of energy company Exelon, formerly known as Commonwealth Edison, which happened to have, remember, we were talking about this a few minutes ago, Thomas Ayers as its CEO. The Crown family also owned the Maytag Appliance Company, and they pledged that they would keep their jobs in Galesburg, Illinois. In June 2005, just months after Obama became a U.S. Senator, Michelle Obama happened to be named a non-executive director of the board of Treehouse Foods, a supplier of Walmart, for a salary of $51,200 in 2005 and $101,000 in 2006. And she just happened to be given 7,500 Treehouse stock options. They're worth about $72,000. Even though she had never run a business and knew nothing about the private sector. In 2006, Obama pushed for a $1 million earmark for the University of Chicago. Michelle was promoted, at the same time, to Vice President of Community and External Affairs for the hospitals there, with a salary increase from $121,900 to $316,962 a year. She happened to receive a public relations help, shall we say, assistance. Michelle Obama achieved these, shall we say, rapid rises in stature and income with the assistance of David Axelrod. In 2006, Sarah P. Hurley, that's Herlihy, an associate of the Chicago law firm of Kirkland and Ellis, I'm sure you guys have heard their name, whose employees contributed, by the way, $87,722 to Obama's presidential campaign, and whose partner, Bruce L. Edelson, just happened to be a member of Obama's campaign finance committee. That firm just happened to write a paper calling for, I quote, the elimination of the natural-born citizen requirements in the United States Constitution. Is all this kind of tying in for you folks? Kind of behind the scenes, little dots? There's lots of other just happens, but I think that you folks kind of see the picture here. This is a cabal of people who have worked and supported one another behind the scenes, doing whatever they had to do to get things done, a la Saul Alinsky's Handbook for Radicals. The means justifies the end. And they're now in power. They're running this country. And that's a fact also. Obama appointed a number of czars, 103 I think to be exact. I've done shows on them, 2 in fact. I went over each and every czar. The show will be listed and the link will be there right for you under this show. And of these czars, more than half were admitted members of the Socialist or Communist Party. Not were, are. More than 90% support globalism, that is, the subordination of sovereign rights of a nation state, like America, to global authority, like the United Nations. More than 90% of them support disarming the population, i.e., gun control. More than 90% of them support cap and trade. Never mind that no other country in the world is going to do it. We should. All of them, virtually all of them, support redistribution of wealth. And there's many other similarities too. A number of them, about 40%, support eugenics, kind of letting old people die off so the more productive members of society can take their place, be more productive, and pay more taxes. Think about that with what's going on with Obamacare, the IPAB panel, cuts in Medicaid, cuts in Medicare, etc. All facts. Once again, you can Google up any of this. You can listen to it on my shows and find more things to Google up. Please, anything you think here is suspect that I'm saying, check it out. So, we now have the Obama czars. Obama met these people in his various travels and dealings with the cabal that I've described to you previously. In 2008, Obama said, "Judge me by who I associate with." I've now given you the facts of who he associated with up to the time of being president. And in the shows on the czars, I give you the facts of who he associates with now in terms of, shall we say, his power structure within a power structure. Those are facts. Now we come to the Constitution. The Constitution is, Obama said just a week ago, less than a week ago, to a fundraising group, hither, yither, and yon, is a, quote, constraint on my actions, unquote. Google it up. In 2001, Mr. Obama said in a PBS interview, and you can listen to the entire interview. In fact, I think you should. 2001 PBS interview, Barack Obama Constitution, Google it up, that the Constitution of the United States is a fundamentally flawed document that is merely a covenant of negative rights. I think that we are all familiar with, and I'm not going to beat the drums because you hear it on the mainstream media, and that's not what the news I'm trying to bring you. We've all heard of what Mr. Obama has been doing in contravention of the Constitution or ignoring the Constitution. And unfortunately, our legislators at the federal levels just don't have the gumption, it seems, to call him out on it. So that that concludes our background portion of the show. I mean, I could go on, but I think that set of facts, that set of dots, gives you a good basis to ask yourself two questions. Does Barack Obama believe in the Constitution? The next question is, does Barack Obama believe in the free market? And the third question is, will Barack Obama follow the law and be transparent, or will he do whatever he needs to do to accomplish his ends, whatever they are? I'm not going to answer those questions for you. You ask them to yourself. Let's move on to international. These are all facts, folks. Google them up. Israel. The only president to ever say that Israel should return to its pre-67 borders is Barack Obama. Iran. Barack Obama has said that Iran will not get the bomb, and that he will achieve that through negotiation. In 2009, with people in the streets and the regime in Iran tottering, and the people calling out for United States assistance and Obama support, he gave none. Iran now is anywhere from 6 months to 1 year from the development of the bomb. You can listen to Israeli intelligence or American intelligence. It's somewhere between tomorrow and a year from now. It is a fact that if Iran becomes a nuclear power, it will change the face of global politics, armament, and make the world a much less safe place. Fact. Iran has said that it will use its nuclear weapons, which it denies building, to eliminate the great Satan, the United States, and the little Satan, Israel. Fact: Barack Obama has several times dissuaded Israel from attacking Iran, even down to the point of leaking sensitive Israeli intelligence information that's been shared between the two allies. Google it up. Fact: Obama tried to reset with Russia. He gave up missile defenses in Poland and the Ukraine, staunch allies of the United States. He got nothing in return. Russia now supports Syria. Perhaps that's one of the reasons we haven't taken any steps in Syria to stop the slaughter there of innocent people by a madman dictator, when we took those steps in advance of any slaughter in Libya. Or perhaps, this is not a fact, this is a surmise, perhaps Gaddafi's involvement back there in Obama's past, shall we say, mandated that he go away. China. Oh, let's go back to Russia. You can Google this up and watch it for yourself. I know many of you have read the transcripts. I've gotten emails, but you really need to see the video to see the body language. So last year at a foreign summit, Obama didn't know the mics were off. He leans over and pats the Russian president, Dmitry, on the knee and says, "This is my last election. After that, I'll have much more flexibility." They were talking about missile defense, not arms control now. Our missile defense against their missiles. Watch the video for yourself. Russia has, of course, been flexing its muscles, and it, shall we say, has new designs on reestablishing itself as an empire. It's now headed by a gentleman by the name of Putin. He's a tough, smart guy. There's been no reset with Russia. Russia has become more aggressive in virtually every corner of the world, including blocking sanctions against Iran, assisting China in trade imbalances with the United States, actively conspiring, this is all on previous shows, folks, actively conspiring with India, China, South Africa, and several other nations to topple the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world, and has been involved in huge cyber attacks against American institutions and government. Let's talk about China. We keep hearing the oh me's, the woes me's, oh, the jobs going out of this country, oh, it's so terrible. I'm just going to give you one fact on this. Jeffrey Immel, the chairman of GE, a company that made $14 billion last year but paid zero taxes, was named by Obama to head up Obama's jobs board. Obama met with the jobs board 4 times in a year. He had not met with them for 6 months prior to the election, and he disbanded them shortly after the election. During the time that Immel was head of Obama's jobs board, GE outsourced 110,000 jobs to China. Those are all facts. Look them up. Let's talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, of course, has ties through the foundational history that I gave you. But the Muslim Brotherhood also has ties to the White House. I recently had a guest on, Ahmed Khalid, an Egyptian, absolutely brilliant international political strategist. You should listen to that interview. You should read his book. No less than 10 of top staffers in the White House now are supporters of or direct members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, we have a sequester. I think we're all familiar with the sequester, right? The end of the world, the stopping of funding, starving cats, poor children, etc., etc. No tours of the White House. These are all facts. And during the sequester, our president has taken 4 vacations at an average cost of $1.4 million each. Vacations and or fundraisers. And his family has taken several vacations at a cost of about $2 million. Those are all facts. So you don't think I'm just sniping at the guy. Here's a bigger number for you. During the sequester, which is hurting all sorts of people because of its misapplication and because of Obama's refusal to take Congress up on an offer to give him the power to decide where the monies would be cut and which critical programs would not be cut. Google it up. It's a fact. But during this sequester, not only did we send $250 billion in cash just a month ago to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, but we also shipped them a number of Abrams tanks, state-of-the-art tanks, and 18 F-18 Phantoms, state-of-the-art warplanes. But it gets better, because they didn't pay us for that stuff. We gave it to them. The United States government took several $100 million out of our pockets, because the United States government is our pockets, bought those planes from these various companies and gave them to the Muslim Brotherhood that runs Egypt during the sequester. Finally, let's get to the UN on this international tangent that we're on. Obama is a supporter of Agenda 21. I've done 3 shows on it. Agenda 21 starts with the premise. You can see it at un.org. It's a real live document that's being implemented. That private property is the root of all social injustice. It goes on. You should listen to the shows. You should read the document right on the UN site. It is the subordination of sovereign rights and individual rights to a global power. As you may or may not know, the UN Small Arms Treaty passed just this week. It was supported by Obama. Its proponents, including Obama, say it doesn't affect anything but trade between countries and it keeps the world safer. In reality, scholars who have looked at it believe that it gives the UN the right to interfere with, even down to confiscation, firearms owned by individuals in any country that ratifies the treaty. The treaty is up for ratification at the United States Senate over the next several weeks. Getting off my factual spiel here, maybe you folks ought to contact your senators and make sure they don't vote for it. You need 67 senators to vote to adopt a treaty. We have the spectacle, of course, of Susan Rice, our erstwhile ambassador to the United Nations, telling us what happened in Benghazi 5 days after the rest of the departments of the United States, other than the administration, were telling us something else. I'm going to bring that up a little bit later. Then, of course, we have the Law of the Sea Treaty, where the United Nations would take over control of our territorial waters, that is, the waters that extend for 12 miles out from our coast, along with the territorial waters of everyone else on the planet. And they would decide how much we get paid and what we could do with them. That's also supported by Obama, and by the way, about 90% of his czars. And Leon Panetta, his defense chief, this is all in my previous shows, folks, you can check it out, was on a commission to study it and highly recommended it. And then, of course, we have cap and trade, where carbon gets taxed and everything you purchase, because everything is made with carbon, goes up incrementally in price, and at the same time, our economic output goes down in equal increments because of the restrictions on production and transportation. The tax, by the way, flows to certain private individuals in what's called a carbon exchange, which include Al Gore and George Soros, Soros being one of Obama's biggest backers, as you know, and behind Common Cause and many of the, shall we say, political drum beaters that beat drums for Obama and his ideologies. That bond fund is expected to be valued, if this ever gets done, at $10 trillion. The rest of the taxes from carbon trades goes to the United Nations so that they can implement all their policies, etc., just like some of the ones I just gave you. So, here's two questions for you after hearing these dots, and boy, this is another one. I could go on all day. Number one, does Mr. Obama harbor sympathies toward Muslims? Number two, does Mr. Obama have antipathy toward Christians? Number three, is the United States, with Mr. Obama as president, truly an ally of Israel? And number four, does Mr. Obama really care if Iran gets the bomb, the killing keeps going in Syria, or the Muslim Brotherhood extends its power and influence in other Mideast countries? After you've answered those questions for yourself, then ask yourself another question depending upon your answer to yourself. Why? Let's go to money and the economy. We have Europe. I gave you a bunch of shows on Europe. I was screaming and yelling about Europe a year and a half or 2 years ago, long before it was big news. We have Cyprus, where the European Union, the European Central Bank, you heard a whole interview on this from an international banker just several weeks ago, commanded the Cypriot government to literally take money out of people's accounts, everybody's accounts. 6.75% if you had an account under 100,000 euros, and up to 40% for accounts over 100,000 euros. In the end, accounts over 100,000 euros got dinged somewhere between 30 and 40%. There's been kind of a news blackout, have you noticed? To tie that into the United States, there are currently bills, this is also on my radio shows almost a year ago, there are actually bills in certain state legislatures and bills that have been introduced, although have not gotten out of committee, in Congress, which would effectively strip your retirement accounts, strip control of them. Oh, they wouldn't just come in and take the money. They're too clever for that. What this does, and you should listen to the radio show for details, it just says all the tax advantages you have in your 401k are gone. However, if you convert your 401k to a government investment certificate, you can have all your tax benefits back. Interesting. But it's a dot, and it's a fact. I gave you an entire show. Once again, the link will be underneath this one on the archives, so you can find it easily, on what was happening in Detroit. This is more than a year ago. And although the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it much, I'm sure you have heard something, somewhere, about the fact that Detroit is on the verge of bankruptcy. The city council and mayor have been pretty much shoved aside, and they've brought in a special manager. Detroit, if you listen to that previous show, it will give you the details, is a model of what happens when social entitlement runs amok and when government tries to manipulate markets and an economy. Detroit is a microcosm of exactly what is happening at the federal level relative to the entire United States right now. That's one of the reasons I urge you to study the situation in Detroit. Do whatever research you want, listen to the show, which will be posted right underneath this one, and go from there and do further research. But I think it'll be an eye-opener for you, because we're going down the same path as Europe, and we're going down the same path as Detroit. And that's a fact. That's not an opinion. Mr. Obama told us that, this is before he got elected the first time, he was going to go through that budget line by line and throw out everything that didn't work. Google it up. There's a whole bunch of videos. And he was going to have the deficit in 3 years. There's a whole bunch of videos. Listen to him. The facts are, there's been no budget for 4 years. Spending has increased by more than $1 trillion a year. I talk about baseline budgeting in my last interview. Because what you didn't know about that stimulus bill, what they didn't tell you, is that once that bill was passed, it raised the base from which all calculations for the budget are done in every subsequent year. That's why when you hear these numbers, and I don't care who gives them to you, that we've cut spending by $1.5 trillion through the budget resolution, no. We haven't cut spending by $1.5 trillion over 10 years. We have decreased the rate of growth, which was locked in at $1 trillion a year the minute that stimulus bill was passed. That's a fact. Mr. Obama has submitted 3 budgets, all of them late, and all of them unanimously defeated in both the Senate and the House. Let me repeat that, unanimously. Every single Democrat in the House and Senate voted against Obama's budgets. His budgets never balance. During this time period, particularly the last year, we've had QE3, where the Federal Reserve, which I think we'll all agree doesn't operate quite so independently from the government as everybody would like to tell you, has been printing $85 billion a month in a plan called QE3, Quantitative Easing 3. Did a whole show on this, several actually, and you should listen to them. So the increased spending is being financed, to make it really simple, by us printing money out of thin air and buying our own debt. That's a fact. In the meantime, there's been a number of parties, a number of vacations by administration and top agency personnel. You've heard about some of them on the news, $1 million shindigs for this agency or that, $1.4 million 2-day golf outings with Tiger Woods, etc. I don't begrudge people fun, but these are facts. The last of them have occurred during the sequester, when supposedly we're totally out of money. Senator Coburn puts together a report every year. He's identified $200 billion in duplicative and waste programs, like studying the genitalia of ducks, deciding which snail is the fastest to travel 10 feet, and I can go on and on. I'm not making this stuff up. Hundreds of thousands, millions, in some cases tens of millions of dollars for this nonsense. Although Senator Coburn has published this for the last 3 years, the administration has taken no steps whatsoever to implement even one iota of this $200 billion in savings, which includes 49 duplicative departments and agencies, including trying to offset their terrible effects of the sequester. In addition, the GAO and the CBO have done reports on another $67 billion in waste and abuse that they have identified. That same $67 billion has been spent every single year since Barack Obama was inaugurated the first time. A total of more than $250 billion over his term thus far. The $200 billion from Coburn, which could be saved each year, and the $67 billion from the GAO and the CBO, which could be saved each year, over the last 4 years equals $1 trillion. The sequester that everybody's wringing their hands over is $44 billion in 2013. Those are all dots. I'll let you connect them. In the domestic arena, we have Obamacare. And that's a whole show in and of itself. But all of you have been hearing the horror stories about Obamacare, so I don't need to repeat them here. Why don't we just say there's a bunch of things you haven't heard that will be on a future show. We have immigration. We have the government now saying we should have more subprime mortgages, i.e. the exact same thing that got us into trouble, which, by the way, was started in that lawsuit I told you about, Citicorp, by Barack Obama himself back in the 90s. Which brings us to the last, perhaps most important part of this show. And that is some very weird things that are going on. I did 2 shows on executive orders and another show on executive orders and ads that have been placed in various newspapers by the federal government promoting job positions for internment camp guards. Now, when they were caught at this several years ago, they took those ads down. But you can still see them on a number of websites. Google it up. In addition, the executive orders, and there's a host of them, and I give you in my shows, and you can look them up for yourself in the Federal Register, some of the most onerous, which includes the NDAA, which basically allows Obama, based on a memo about a purported threat, not a real, but a purported threat, from the Department of Homeland Security head, Janet Napolitano, to declare martial law and to control all food, production, oil, energy, electricity, transportation, commerce, you name it, in the United States, both totally and for every individual. I'm not making this up. You can read the executive order for yourself as posted in the Federal Register, folks. Please listen to those shows or dial it up on Google. NDAA, Obama Executive Orders. Now we have suddenly 6 to 12 months after all these executive orders are quietly signed. Now we have this huge push for gun control. We also have a series of tragedies. In my world, there are no coincidences. Because at the same time that we have this huge push for gun control, we have a Department of Homeland Security, remember, who writes the memo to impose martial law or invoke these executive orders, buying approximately 2 billion rounds of ammunition over a 5-year period on a no-bid basis, much of it from Remington Arms, a good portion of it, slightly less than half, hollow point bullets. For anybody who knows anything about guns, hollow point bullets are not used for target practice, although the Department of Homeland Security, after submitting redacted documents and saying they were just trying to save money by buying in bulk, said that they were buying in bulk because it was for target practice. To put this in perspective, at the height of the Iraq War, this is another fact and dot for you, there were 70 million rounds a year being shot off by the U.S. military at the height of the Iraq War. More troubling is that DHS, it's just recently been learned, has also had contracts in the middle of the sequester, no less, for 2,700 retrofitted and new light tanks and armored vehicles. This is your Department of Homeland Security. This is not your Army. I would invite you to go back and put another dot on your piece of paper. Dial up Barack Obama, National Civilian Defense, or Barack Obama, National Civilian Security Force. You can listen to what he thinks in his own words. In summary, he believes in a civilian security force, and this is almost a quote, as well armed and funded as the military. There are 15 congressmen now that have signed letters. I mean, Congress is finally waking up to this. This is just in the last few weeks. that have demanded explanations for all this stuff from the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security has either refused to answer, has submitted redacted documents, has denied that they're actually buying all this stuff, even though everybody has the records, and has refused to come forward and testify. That's a fact. Now, we're coming to the end of this show. I've given you a lot of facts. I really seriously could have talked for hours on these subjects. But I hope I've given you enough of a broad brush on background, international, economic, domestic, military, and these very troubling executive orders coupled with gun control, coupled with a domestic agency buying more ammunition and weapons than our army used in Iraq. And I'm going to let you connect the dots. I'm going to give you one final dot before we get off the air together. And that final dot, folks, is if you Google up Bill Ayers, Federal Bureau of Investigation deposition, or Bill Ayers FBI interview, Bill Ayers tells the FBI interviewer, when he's asked what will happen when he gets his socialist utopia in place with the 25 million or so Americans that won't go along, he answers, well, we'll just have to get rid of them. That's your final dot for today. This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the right side. Your comments would be appreciated. Check out those archives, do your research, and think.
For more information about Reid and his work, please go to ontherightsideradio.com. There you can also click to purchase the first 2 volumes of his #1 best-selling historical Western series, Threads West, An American Saga, and Maps of Fate. And now the first volume of his new nonfiction series, Land for Love and Money, is available everywhere, or go to landforloveandmoney.com. That's Land for Love and Money. We'd also like to remind you that if you've missed any shows, you can go to the show archives on Reid's ontherightsideradio.com webpage. We look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.